Okay, so Persona 5, the first Persona game for plenty of people, me included, much to the anger of some older Persona fans. And you know what? Even 5 years later down the road, it's still a really solid game. With great characters, no not you, fun combat, and a really engaging story. And when I say great characters, I mean a bunch of them, outside of your main immediate friends like Ryuji, An, and Makoto. You've got Mishima, who kinda stalks you at first, an alcoholic reporter lady, an ex-Yakuza, I think, who owns an airsoft gun store and hooks you up with realistic looking guns. A fortune teller who tries to scam you, and your homeroom teacher. You can also date most of them, yes, even your teacher if you want to. But let's go back and look at the main friend group who happen to be your partners in crime, the Phantom Thieves. Stealing hearts and making criminals confess their sins with their own mouths. Which they do in a weird way. It's not like they're breaking into someone's house and threatening them into a confession. No, thankfully their way involves a lot less breaking and entering. Although not completely. Via a phone app, they enter a cognitive dimension and fight their way through the distorted version of wherever the target's desires are focused on. A school, their house, the Wendy's down the street. Really, it could be anywhere, but usually it's a place that you either have really high standing in, or just own outright. For example, Kamoshida is the gym teacher at Joker's new school. He is a piece of garbage, abusing his students and forcing himself on some of the girls. Thieves break into his palace, steal his treasure, and lo and behold, a few weeks later after secluding himself away, Kamoshida confesses everything in front of the school and turns himself into the police. You deserve so much worse. But these palaces are dangerous. A normal person, even with real weapons, would stand little chance inside, mostly due to the demons roaming around. So how are high school students supposed to fight demons? Well, when pushed to the breaking point, put in a desperate situation, or standing up to an oppressor, you can either crumble under the pressure, or awaken your persona, a manifestation of your true self. And in the metaverse, where demons roam and palaces form, personas are powerful, allowing the user to fight on equal terms. It also helps that in the metaverse, perception and cognition are king. If a demon sees you carrying a gun, it doesn't matter if that is a fake gun. If they think it's real, it's going to shoot fake bullets and deal real damage to the demons. And this is how the Phantom Thieves fight, using their personas to summon thunderstorms, balls of fire, nuclear radiation, or just beating the snot out of demons in any other way they can. And there are a bunch of Phantom Thieves too. Obviously the original four, Joker, Morgana, Ryuji, and An, but also in order of them joining, Lobsterman Yusuke, Makoto the aspiring biker cop, the shut-in hacker Futaba, Haru the cinnamon roll, two-faced Goro Akechi, and Kasumi. Sumire. I always get those two mixed up. And I'm going to be 100% honest, I'm not building all of them, at least not in this video. I will put them all in the character file, but I'm only going to pick 4 to be in this video, because no way I am making 10 characters in one video. Also, I made the mistake of forgetting that Persona 5 is in fact a JRPG, so you go from fighting pixies to punching God in the face. So yeah, you'll be able to see all the characters on my Patreon for $1. I'm probably going to be doing this a good bit in the future with characters that I can't fit into the video or for some reason just don't quite fit the team dynamic, so that'll be a little extra perk on Patreon on top of voting on the polls. Now the question is, who do I make, outside of the obvious one being Joker, who I am saving for the end of the video. So I could tell you that I picked the characters based on whatever subclasses they had that I hadn't really touched on before, or the most interesting build, but really I just wanted to cover some of my favorite characters. So, first up is, no, Morgana, not you. Maybe if you had made me go to sleep so early every night, I would have put you in the video. But no, putting Morgana aside, we are looking at our best buddy, Ryuji Sakamoto, the muscle of the Phantom Thieves. Well, one of the muscles. Ryuji used to be a star athlete on the track team, up until he finally stood up to their coach, the Olympic gold medalist, Kamoshida, who again had been abusing the students. In the case of the track team, he was pushing them far too hard and would beat them when they couldn't keep up. So when Ryuji did stand up to him, Kamoshida promptly broke Ryuji's knee, ending his track career on the spot and ruining the chances for the track team to win an upcoming event, which somehow the team blamed on him. Meaning that all in one go, Ryuji went from a pretty popular track star to a delinquent who attacked a teacher and no longer had any friends. Well, at least until Ren or Joker comes along, and the two of them find themselves stumbling into the metaverse, but more specifically, the palace of Kamoshida, who saw himself as the king of the school. This did not go well for the two. They were quickly attacked by the guards and thrown into the castle prison, where they were not only assaulted further by Shadow Kamoshida, but they were also going to be late for school on Ren's first day. And as a delinquent, that's not a good thing. And before we get into how they escape, let's see where all of this info gets us here. Obviously, Ryuji is going to be a human, big surprise. Pretty much everyone I cover here is going to be a human, so I'm not really going to mention that from here on out, outside of maybe their feats. Which for Ryuji, I gave him the tough feat. He's a pretty beefy guy, and a lot of his persona abilities use his HP as the cost for using the ability, so he's gotta have a lot to not bleed himself dry. But putting that aside, his background was kinda hard, since yes, he is a student, but that's only really because he has to be. Ryuji is more of an athlete, and the best thing for that is the soldier background, which gives him the athletic skill and the savage attacker feat, even if at this very moment he can't really do much in terms of fighting shadows. But that all changes during the second escape from the castle, where Joker and Ryuji are cornered by a demon that is far too strong for Joker and Morgana to deal with alone. Meanwhile, Ryuji is helpless, taunted by Kamoshida as he watches Joker, his new and really only friend, get beaten down and almost executed. And all of this caused Ryuji to be pushed past his breaking point, forcing his other true self to the surface, awakening his persona, Captain Kidd. A manifestation of Ryuji's desire for vengeance against Kamoshida that hits really hard with physical attacks and can channel lightning. This also gave Ryuji a brand new outfit, wearing what looks to be full black leather top and pants with his skull mask and sporting a lead pipe as a weapon. With this, Ryuji, Joker, and Morgana took down the demon in their way and continued their escape, but they'd be back before too long. But back outside, Ryuji returns to normal, with his persona and other abilities only accessible in the metaverse, leaving us with the good old, kinda dumb Ryuji. And yeah, Ryuji is not the brightest, but I don't think it's just that he's an idiot. He just doesn't put effort into learning, instead focusing on stuff he enjoys. And that tells us a lot, which we can use to put his stats together. Starting off with a 16 constitution. Again, he is a tough cookie, and his physical persona attacks use his own HP, so he needs to have as much of that as he can. Followed by a 15 in strength. Not only does he have weights in his room, but he's swinging around a lead pipe and other pipe-adjacent weapons. Then 14 dex. Despite his nature, he was a track star, and wouldn't really have gotten all that far if he was constantly stumbling over his own feet. Now here was one of the hard parts, choosing between dumping wisdom or intelligence for Ryuji. And in the end, I ended up going with a slightly higher than you might think number for his wisdom, 12. Because when I look at Ryuji, I see someone who's more street smart than book smart. Which means Ryuji's 10 is going into charisma. He is constantly trying to pick up girls, and just as constantly being rejected because he can't not put his own foot in his mouth. And like I said, he dumps intelligence, so that's going to be an 8. Big surprise.
For real?
Now these stats only really give us a few options for his starting classes. At first I thought about going Barbarian and maybe taking the Storm Herald subclass, which very much could work, but unlike someone else in the party, Ryuji never really goes into a bloodthirsty or mindless rage. Sure, sometimes he gets heated, but he's always himself and mostly calm. So I decided to go with something else, and we'll just have to cover his lightning stuff some other way a little bit further down the road. Oh, actually, on that note, I know a lot of other channels that do this sort of thing, D&D builds and 2-lock, hop around their levels a lot, and I don't do that. I just go down one class until I'm done, and I wanted to ask all of you if you'd rather me keep going this way, where I go down everything from one class before hopping over to the next one, or would you like it more if I jumped around at certain levels to split everything up a little bit? Tell me in the comments and I will see what I can do, but I'm probably going to test it here in this video. Now back to Ryuji, I wanted to set his persona aside for just a minute and focus on him and his abilities, like how chunky he is, how hard he smacks demons with his club, and his insta-kill ability on lower level shadows. I also want to tie in some of his real life stuff like how athletic he is, especially after having one of his knees broken by Kamoshida, which is impressive. I think having what should be a career-ending injury and then getting back into training for just a few months before pulling off jumps like this, it's remarkable. And to match that, and his big muscles when fighting, I think the best option for Ryuji is going to be the champion fighter. Fighters have good hit points, and the champion fighter gives him remarkable athlete, making him quick on the draw for combat and giving him advantage on athletics checks. It also ties into his insta-kill, letting him keep moving after he crits. And speaking of crits, improved critical lets him crit more often on a 19 or 20, so pretty much doubling his chances. And that right there. Critical hits are how I'm choosing to represent his insta-kill feature. If you have weaker enemies and the fighter goes up to them and crits them on the first turn of combat with extra damage from, say, the Charger feat, it's going to deal a lot of damage, and again, if they're a weaker enemy with lower hit points, it could potentially kill them outright. And speaking of feats, to keep Ryuji's hit points topped up, he is going to grab the Durable feat at level 6, which will let him heal himself a little bit. Now I really want to focus on how hard-hitting Ryuji can be. Because not only does he go bonking things with his club, but after awakening his persona again, going from Captain Kid to William? Just William? Okay. Well, William here gets the single hardest hitting physical attack in the game, God's Hand. So I want to make sure Ryuji can actually output some ridiculous damage numbers just by smacking people. Now in practice for what I asked you guys about just a minute ago, I want to cover one more thing from Fighter before multiclassing. And it's totally not because the next thing is going to give away what I'm doing with the next class. So fighters get a ton of ASIs. He's already got 2, but how about a 3rd? And since I want to prepare for his eventual lightning powers, he's going to grab Elemental Attunement Lightning, and use the +1 bonus to boost his 12 in Wisdom up to a 13 so he can jump over to his other class. Now there are 3 options he could technically go for. Monk could work given his lack of visible armor outside of some knee pads and such, so I could really see Warrior of the Elements working. But I feel like I've gone with that subclass a little too much recently, so let's keep going. There's also the Druid, but yeah, no, I'm pretty sure he's not one of those. Which leaves us with the last option that I totally wasn't holding off until the end to reveal, the Cleric, which conveniently has a subclass that does really well on the front lines and loves to flash cook enemies with powerful lightning attacks. This is the Tempest Domain Cleric. Not only letting Ryuji smack people back if they attack him, but also letting him ignore rolling and just choose to maximize the damage of one of his lightning spells, like Thunderous Smite, or better yet, the 3rd level spell Call Lightning, which seems like a pretty damn good fit for Maziodyne, which hits all enemies for heavy lightning damage. Plus he can keep this one going every turn, calling down lightning as an action over and over and over again if he wants to. But Ryuji is only going to go the 5 levels into Cleric that he needs for Call Lightning, although he does grab 1 ASI for a +2 to Wisdom on his way out. You could go a bit deeper for Thunderous Strike to push stuff away, or way deeper for Divine Strike, but I chose not to because for the most part his bonking and lightning stuff are completely separate attacks. And all of this means for however many levels Ryuji has left, they are all going into Fighter. And right now, including his 5 levels in Cleric, he has a total level of 13. But I still have some more stuff I want to get before we end this, like more attacks, and also the ability to change his weapon mastery abilities around if he needs something for a different sort of debuff. But really what I want are the 2 more ASIs/feats. One of them is going into Great Weapon Master for even harder bonking, making sure he does in fact one-shot crit smaller shadows. And lastly, for his final level, 14 levels in Fighter, he is going to bump up his Strength and Con by 1, giving him an 18 in both and a total of 19 levels. That is going to give him a ton of HP and some very strong whacks with a lead pipe. Certainly enough to put any overly eager gym teachers in their place. The ground. Alright, fine, prison. Ryuji, while being kind of an idiot, is a good guy at heart, willing to risk his well-being and even his life to protect his friends and family.
I am thou. There is no turning back. The skull of rebellion is your flag henceforth!
Okay, hey, I'm dropping in here before we get too deep into the video to make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. I make these team builds every 2 weeks, and if I could get my brain to focus, I would love to get out more. Maybe do some homebrew again, or some campaign guides. Also, I want to remind you to check out the Wandering Tavern. The people over at Homie and the Dude have been awesome to work with, and they have put a lot of amazing things into the Wandering Tavern. Combat maps for causing chaos in, pre-written plot hooks, NPCs, magic items, and even a bunch of airships with their own stat blocks. So if any of that sounds fun to you, especially as a DM who might be fighting burnout from writing your own stories and stuff, you can get a whole 10% off of your order if you use my discount code GMG. It's a free discount and it tells you that I sent you over there. So I do want to point out that normally I try to look at a character's feats in their respective stories to see how I build them, and you may have noticed I didn't really do a lot of that with Ryuji. And that's because, well, Persona 5 is a JRPG, and most of the feats they have are frankly ridiculous, like just dodging or blocking planetary level attacks. So when it comes to these, rather than getting their exact abilities down, I'm just trying to go for an interesting build that feels like the character. I just wanted to put that out there. Now we can get back to building what's probably the highest overall leveled team I've ever made. So like I said at the start of this video, there are a ton of amazing characters in this game. And while I love characters like An and Yusuke, I want to look at the 6th member of the Phantom Thieves, Makoto Nijima, who is another student at Shujin Academy along with Joker, Ryuji, An, and a few others. But unlike them, especially Ryuji, Makoto takes her schooling seriously and is actually the student council president. Outside of school though, Makoto lives with her older sister, Seinijima, a public prosecutor, who you'll recognize as the person interrogating Joker throughout the game. Which I always find especially funny if you date Makoto, because imagine you're interrogating someone, and somehow the fact that they're dating your sister is important enough to bring up multiple times, and they aren't even lying. But back on the topic of Makoto, she is a very justice-driven character, partially because she looked up to her father, who had been a cop until his untimely death at the hands of Truck-kun. This leads to Makoto pretty much being raised by Sei, and, well, tensions can be high between the two sometimes. But even before then, the school was asking Makoto to look into the Phantom Thieves because that's where they first appeared. Yes, the school was asking one of their students to do detective work on criminals, effectively. And she pretty quickly catches on to Joker, An, and Ryuji because Ryuji cannot shut his mouth about being the Phantom Thieves for 5 minutes. And I think this gives us a good idea of what kind of background we can give Makoto. Someone who looks up to her father and sister, both of which have a spot in law enforcement in one way or another. And since she more closely wants to follow her father's footsteps and become a cop, the guard origin actually fits really well. Sure, she's not quite there yet, but she has the right qualities to be an actually good cop. Now this gives her a few skills as always, and the alert feat, which is fitting because Makoto is usually pretty quick on the draw even outside of the metaverse. But moving on from that, this is where we get into some of the fun stuff with Makoto, because while yes, she is tasked with finding the Phantom Thieves, she doesn't just turn you in. She blackmails you. Partially because she wants the thieves' help to investigate certain girls at school getting into, let's say, some shady stuff. So Makoto forces the group to show her the metaverse and how they change hearts, which leads to everyone getting blackmailed by the mob boss Kaneshiro into paying back a stupid amount of money. Which, even for the Phantom Thieves, who can get real money by beating up demons in the depths of the human subconscious, is way too much. And this leads to a meeting with Lord of the Flies Kaneshiro over here, who proceeds to taunt and threaten Makoto with the consequences of failing to pay him. And for Makoto, who again is a very righteous person, this is too much. Makoto sat back, unable to do anything while Kamoshida was running rampant in the school, and even obeyed the principal in trying to track down people that outed the scumbag. She had pushed her true desires away for too long, and this was the last straw. The last push for her to awaken her persona. And fitting for Makoto, Johanna is not only a persona, but also a motorcycle, giving her this cool biker outfit, and keying us into something else important for this build. Makoto happens to practice martial arts, and that combined with Johanna being a bike, makes this build a lot more fun. Now outside of letting Makoto do the Akira slide, Johanna gives her access to some healing magic, and something that's probably the opposite of healing magic, nukes, or nuclear damage. Which is actually one of the few damage types that doesn't have a direct analog into D&D. But if I just pull up this little thing here, we've got nukes, and what do nukes cause? Radiation, which happens to be very close linguistically to radiant damage. Now obviously these are actually very different, but making this distinction lets me do something with this build that I think is at least pretty unique. But before I show you the weird combo I've made here, let's take a look at Makoto's stats super quickly. Starting off with a high dex for her martial arts, and normally I would say it would help with her stealth, but this girl's not sneaking. Makoto is also a very good student and seems pretty knowledgeable about a lot of topics, so I'm throwing her 14 in intelligence. Her stats are going to be a little bit all over the place, and I could have put her 14 in something else, but I would have felt really weird giving her a 10 in intelligence when she is the second smartest person on the team. Along with that, I gave her a 13 in wisdom. Again, she was able to kinda pin down who the thieves were pretty quickly, even before Ryuji declared it to the world. And along with that, a 13 in charisma. Nothing special, but we need it for something, and she at the very least can lie right to her sister's face, who again is a lawyer and should be pretty good at spotting lies. 12 in con, she is a tough cookie, but she needs other stuff more, and she dumps strength, because again, she's not really weak, but she doesn't need it with a high dex for martial arts. So yeah, like I said, her stats are a little bit all over the place, but it will make sense very soon. There's also something I just now realized I failed to mention with Ryuji, but something I need to figure out with every one of these builds is how to give them a gun. For instance, in-game, Ryuji has a shotgun, and here he has a thunderclap, which is close enough. But Makoto carries around a big iron, which is a bit harder to get if you're not using the actual, firearms rules. You could always just give her a hand crossbow, but that just doesn't have enough oomph for a big revolver like this. So let's get that real quick, and it's gonna be kinda weird. And honestly, for both Makoto's guns and her martial arts, a monk is really the best bet. She gets martial arts, unarmored defense and movement, and more importantly from her subclass, she gets Radiant Sunbolt, which is her gun. because Makoto is a Sun Soul monk. Yes, this is a bit of an odd choice, but unlike Ryuji, where I went out of my way to separate his bonking and lightning, with Makoto it works out best if you mix them both together. Makoto is also going to grab something very special at level 4, something I have never used in any of my builds, nor have I ever used while playing D&D, the Mounted Combat Feat. That's right, I am making Makoto a mounted monk. But normal mounts are, well, squishy, and you can't summon them from your soul whenever you need. So for that, Makoto was actually going to use that 13 in Charisma we gave her a while ago to jump over to the Paladin for a couple levels, that being 5, specifically for the new Faithful Steed feature giving her a free cast of Find Steed. Meaning not only does Makoto get her nuke powers from Johanna, she has an actual Johanna she can ride around, like a motorcycle, while firing revolver shots through shadows. Now, Faithful Steed is far from the only thing I'm here for from Paladin. If all I wanted was Find Steed, I could have gotten it way faster by doing something else. But if we make Makoto an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, she gets the Channel Divinity, Vow of Amity, so all of her many attacks she gets as a monk will have advantage. And that's not even mentioning Smite, and I may have talked about it before, but I'm not exactly a fan of the new Smite rules, and in any upcoming games I run, I'm going to make a few adjustments to find kind of a happy medium between the huge nerfs of the 2024 version, and how overpowered the original was. But as it stands with the new rules, Flurry of Blows and Smite both cost a bonus action, so you can only do one or the other. I also use these Paladin levels to get her a nice +2 bump to her dex to up her AC, damage, saves, and everything else the dex does. But with those 5 Paladin levels out of the way, she is going to jump back over to Monk for everything else, which mostly consists of more punching and nuke attacks. Okay, technically the level 6 feature Searing Arc Strike does fire damage, but it still hits multiple targets, so I think it's fine for a lower level nuke attack. She's also going to grab the Sentinel feat, so even if someone could run away from her or Johanna, they won't be doing it for long with their feet cuffed together. Now there are some abilities that technically everyone gets just for being a certain level or having a certain ranking with Joker. But if Makoto is going to get it anyway, I might as well point out that Self-Restoration lets her remove some conditions on herself at 0 cost. And among the last few features from Makoto, one of them is going to be her last nuke attack with Searing Sunburst, pretty much letting Makoto hurl fireballs of radiant damage at whoever she wants. The damage isn't amazing without pumping some extra focus points into it, but AoE damage is AoE damage at the end of the day. And after that, there aren't all that many things left for her to get. Another ASI for a +2 to dex, deflect energy so she can bat aside physical and magical attacks. And I might as well mention it, Disciplined Survivor makes it so Makoto not only has proficiency in all saving throws, but also she can just re-roll one if she fails it. This is by all means a very weird build, and in all honesty, not a very optimal one. And sure, I could have just used some flavor for Johanna, but that is a lot less funny than a girl riding around on her spirit motorcycle doing drive-by punch attacks and then throwing balls of nuclear radiation at her enemies. But I still think this mix of monk and paladin is fun. It's a great fit for the martial artist turned biker cop. And with the Phantom Thieves and Johanna by her side, no one's gonna be escaping Makoto. Not even her sister.
This memorable day marks your graduation from your false self.
What the hell?
So, we're down to our last 2 members, and while I really want to look at some of the characters like Futaba, maybe Haru, or even Akechi, there was one character that came out in Royal that I couldn't not make. Kasumi Yoshizawa. Well, no, actually her name is Samira Yoshizawa, and she's going to have a very spoiler-heavy section, so if you plan on playing this game in the near future, maybe skip this part. So who is Kasumi, and by extension her sister, and why am I talking like they're the same person? Well, because they kind of are, but only kind of. Samiri and her sister are twins, both doing gymnastics and both having very high expectations placed upon them. But Samiri simply wasn't as good as Kasumi, and after a while this really wore down on her. Eventually this caused Samiri to have a bit of a mental breakdown that unfortunately led directly to her sister's death. Running off into the street without thinking, Kasumi pushed Samiri out of the way of danger and unfortunately passed away via car accident. This obviously upset Samiri greatly, and with a little help from the school therapist who may or may not have been knowingly altering reality, she started to believe that she was Kasumi. So much so that she believed that Samiri was the one who died, and she kept this up for months, doing gymnastics and trying to be her sister, and eventually running into Joker, which is where things start to look a little brighter for her, having someone to connect with, but as you know, things always get worse before they get better. Let's get back to that in a minute though and see what we've got going on here. Now there are a few good backgrounds that could fit. The haunted one comes to mind given her recent trauma, but with how she is still actively chasing the dream her and Kasumi shared, being top gymnasts, I think something a bit more special is in order. So for the first time, I made a custom background, the gymnast, which gives her the lucky feat, acrobatics, and performance for skills, and whatever tool you want, I guess, it's not super important. Keeping the ball rolling, her stats are also thankfully very straightforward. Being a gymnast, she has high dex, and almost as high as that is her constitution and charisma. Doing all those routines over and over and over again, especially in practice, is going to build up a lot of stamina. Plus, Sumire is always pretty kind and well-spoken. Sumire is also not exactly dumb, so I put that one higher than her strength at 10, and her wisdom is 8. Since while I know this is very much influenced by her sister's death, she folded pretty quickly when it came to Maruki's meddling. Plus, she really doesn't need wisdom for much. But what about Sumire in combat? How does she fight? Well, at first, not at all. She's actually a really late game character despite being one of the only additional Phantom Thieves to join with the update. But yeah, she doesn't get any ability to fight until she is lost inside of a hidden palace. And not only is she shown an image of her dead sister, but is forced to watch as that same image is killed. And the shadow that did it proceeds to yell at her about how she should effectively suck it up and stop suffering. And as tends to happen when you put a highly emotional teenager in a stressful situation, this causes her feelings to overflow. Ever since Kasumi's death, she's been pushing herself harder and harder, but still failing to live up to the expectations of others and herself. And all the while hearing other students at school and even the faculty talk down about her, about how she's not good enough and how they wish Kasumi had lived instead. And here, lost in a strange and unfamiliar place, confronted with all of this turmoil again, Sumire awakens to her persona, Cendrillon. A persona that, at least in my opinion, is kind of meant to mirror Arsene, just stronger. Where Arsene attacks with Curse and applies debuffs, Cendrillon heals and uses Bless attacks. But even without Cendrillon, in the metaverse, Sumire is actually really strong, putting her gymnastics to good use. Her fighting style is very performative, jumping around, taking poses, adding flourishes to her attacks. It's all very fancy. And there happens to be a perfect class and subclass for this kind of thing, the College of Swords Bard. Which, yes, I'm aware I used this last video for Aftalia, but for her it really only fit mechanically, while here it fits both in terms of the mechanics and also the flavor. Sumire literally dancing around mid-fight is not something I'm going to ignore for this. And in this case, Sumire can use all 3 flourishes, defensive, slashing, and mobile. She gets extra attack at level 6, and everything else a Bard does. Now I'm not exactly sure how far into Bard to go just yet, so before I decide on that, let's hop over to another class to get Cendrillon sorted out. Since she has some really heavy-hitting physical and bless attacks, and I want to represent her in a slightly different way. Now, while I was writing this script, I actually made a bit of a change to Sumire's build. Originally, I had her as a Phantom Rogue for a few reasons, and while I really liked how that fit for the themes, mechanically I really couldn't justify really any of her abilities. So instead, I pivoted a bit and went to a fairly common class people suggest for any Persona character, the Warlock. Since you are in a way making a deal, signing a contract, even if it might be with your inner self. Which you could also use to justify the Sorcerer, but I think the Warlock here works a bit better, especially with the Celestial Warlock for Cendrillon's Bless attacks. Plus it does give her a little healing which she does get access to in the game, but the real reason I'm here is again to get Sumire's gun. Which of course is going to be Eldritch Blast with the Agonizing Blast invocation. She can also get a few other ones, but most importantly is something I've been doing my best to get for every single member of the Phantom Thieves, Mask of Many Faces, or another way to cast Disguise Self. I'm pretty sure I got it on everyone so far, I might just not have really mentioned it. And that's mostly what I'm here in Warlock for, so a total of 5 levels into Warlock for those, and then we are hopping back over to Bard for the rest of Sumire's levels. And for that, I not only want to look a bit more closely at her persona, but also at Sumire's awakening. Because if you've played really any amount of this game, you'll have noticed something. Every time someone tears off their mask to reveal their true self and awaken their persona, it doesn't just look like it takes a lot of effort. There is visible blood as they wrench it off of their face. But look here at Sumire's original awakening. Sure, she's clearly in pain from the headache of all this, voices in her head, overwhelming emotions, but the mask? It just flies right off. No blood, no fuss, nothing. Because at this point, Sumire is still pretending to be Kasumi. She's not tearing away her mask and showing who she really is, because even after awakening her persona, she's still wearing another mask. The mask of her dead sister, Kasumi. Which causes quite a few issues when her persona starts to ignore her summons. Now this does get settled pretty quickly when she fully accepts everything, including who she is. And after a little bit of face wrenching and blood, we're treated to Sumeri's true awakening with Cendrillon, ready for their debut and for the rest of their levels. Now you may have noticed a bit of a theme with everyone in their levels, that being both Ryuji and Makoto are level 19. And while I thought about changing that up here, I think 14 levels of Bard is just fine. And I know these levels seem pretty high, but remember, this is a JRPG. These characters need to be able to walk up to God and demand his lunch money. And 14 levels happens to get Sumeri the last feature for any Bard subclass. And in the case of the College of Swords, that is the Master's Flourish, which effectively means Sumeri has an infinite number of blade flourishes as long as she's willing to drop the die down from a d10 to a d6. Also, I kind of forgot to mention her ASIs and feats along the way, so here we go. She's going to take a +2 to Dex and Charisma for more inspiration die and overall damage, the Defensive Duelist feat for more Dex and AC, and the Martial Adept feat for the riposte and lunging attack maneuvers. I can totally see one of her sword swings catching you off guard with how spinny she is. And I would never take that away. Even when fighting metaphysical gods and demons, Sumeri can't not put a little bit of flair into her performance, all while carrying the memories and dreams of her sister.
The weak, insecure Sumeri dies today! You were the one. The only one who stayed true to yourself. Come, Cendrillon! If you don't answer my call now, how else can we make our dream come true?
Oh, I can smell it already. This is going to be another 40-minute video. I just know it. That's fine though. These builds were really fun to make, but we aren't done yet. We still have the main boy, the leader of the Phantom Thieves, stealer and breaker of hearts, if you're an ass and try to date everybody, Joker. Obviously his name changes to whatever name you give him, but he does have a canon name which for some reason is different in the games and the anime, but I'm just going to call him Joker, who starts off as a simple high school student heading home late one day, when he happens across what almost seems like a kidnapping, someone yelling at a lady to get in his car and her refusing. So like any good and well-meaning citizen would, he went to help, only to get arrested for assaulting somebody after accidentally pushing the guy over. And unfortunately, the lady he was trying to protect speaks out against him because she was intimidated by the guy. This not only gets Joker kicked out of his current school, so he has to go to a new one, but he also has to move in with this sour old man, Sojiro, or Coffee Dad, who is thankfully nice enough to let Joker live in the upstairs of his coffee shop. And while he does start off thinking he's just kind of a thug and a troublemaker, Sojiro does warm up to him over time and almost sees Joker as his own son. And this is for a few reasons. First off, Joker is just a normal kid. He stays out of trouble, and as long as you pay attention in class, or have a walkthrough guide on your other screen, gets good grades. Unfortunately for Joker though, even as quickly as his second day in his new home, things start to get weird. Not only with this weird app being installed on his phone that he can't seem to get rid of, but he also has his first run-in with the eventual target of the Phantom Thieves, Kamoshida, as he drives off with a female student in his car. But let's not get into the heavy stuff just yet. Instead, a super quick dip into Joker's backstory, which given what everyone thinks about Joker and how easily he manages to get into like making lockpicks and buying stuff off the black market, I think the criminal background is kind of a given. Even if strictly speaking there are no laws against entering someone's subconscious mind and giving their morals an adjustment, he's a criminal either way. It matters very little that Joker knocked that guy over defending somebody else. The Japanese justice system is kinda screwed. It's not quite as bad as an Ace Attorney where the prosecutor can literally whip the judge to shut him up, but it's still pretty bad. And thankfully though, being a criminal gives Joker a few things he's really gonna need here in about a month as a Phantom Thief. The alert feat makes it so he's less likely to get ambushed, and some very important skills in stealth and sleight of hand. But right now Joker is still just a normal high school student, so let's fix that by quickly looking at his stats. And surprisingly, they're very similar to Sumeri's, with high dex, con, and charisma. And given that you work out in your room, like, at all, Joker can actually get pretty beefy in terms of his HP. His wisdom and intelligence are fine, he's not dumb at all or anything, but he just needs other things more, and he dumps strength. If he used a heavier weapon, like a sword or something, I might have changed that, but he really only ever uses daggers and dagger-adjacent weapons. You could maybe call that a short sword if you're pushing it. Okay, so I talked a bunch about Kamoshida in Ryuji's section, so let's skip to the important part for Joker. Not 10 minutes after meeting Kamoshida and his new best friend Ryuji, both of them are thrown into the castle prison cell and beaten, only for Joker to watch as Shadow Kamoshida is about to kill Ryuji in front of him. And just like we saw at the start of the game, Joker can't just sit back and watch someone get hurt. He refuses to do nothing while someone else is about to die. And this refusal, this rebellion, is what sparks his vow with his first of many personas, Arsene. Now, a very important thing with Joker is that he is what's known as a trickster. And while most people only have a single persona, like everyone else so far, tricksters can form pacts with other spirits and turn them into usable personas, so Arsene normally doesn't stick around. But here's the thing. Most people who build Joker go about it with a bunch of summoning, which makes sense to some degree, but I want to take it in a different direction. Whenever Joker summons a persona, they aren't a creature on the battlefield. They don't have separate HP or SP pools. And the way I see it, it's more like he's channeling their power rather than summoning them in the same way as a actual summoning spell like Find Familiar. So when Joker changes to Jack Frost and uses him to summon a giant ice attack, you don't need to summon an ice golem. You can just cast Cone of Cold. But before we get too deep into his personas, let's grab a few things that will help with the whole phantom thieving part. Joker does a lot of parkour, climbing, fitting into small spaces, stuff you might expect from a master thief, but maybe less so from a high schooler. Unless that high schooler happens to have 3 levels in Thief Rogue, giving him fast hands for disarming traps and quickly opening locks, and second story work so he can climb and even use his dex for jumping. He's also got a grappling hook and some really big hops, but if he's gonna do some actual fighting, he's gonna need a persona. And the way I chose to tackle this is mostly what I said before, choosing to represent personas with spells. And using his second, but really his primary class, Joker can cover a good few personas. And not only can he keep Arsene, he even gets something very special at the end. And this of course is the Warlock, and just like Samire, the Celestial Warlock. Letting Joker cover the damage and debuffing of the persona I want to focus on, Arsene, but if he needs to, he can heal, buff, and exploit certain weaknesses. Now, while his spells and other class features let Joker be very versatile, I wanted to make sure he was still a threat in melee, since he can still cut down pretty big opponents with that dagger of his. So to cover that, there are a good few invocations that'll work here. First off, Pack of the Blade, Thirsting and Devouring Weapon, on top of Life Drinker, so he can attack 3 times and add his charisma to the damage of each attack. I also went ahead and grabbed Armor of Shadows and Mask of Many Faces, both protecting his body and identity. You know, as long as Ryuji doesn't blow their cover again. I also thought Devil's Sight fit really well with how he seems to see in the dark, and Eldritch Mind. Warlocks already have precious few spell slots, so being able to really focus and not drop concentration on a spell you just cast is well worth one of your many invocations. Now, as stated before, Joker has a bunch of personas, most of which could be covered with spells. But I want to take this down a slightly different route, again, and focus mostly on personas that align with Arsene, like Raoul, who as far as I can tell is just a stronger version of Arsene. And because Arsene, and by extension Raoul, are Joker's initial personas, those are the ones I want to focus on. And the best analog for curse damage in D&D is going to be necrotic damage. So plenty of spells like Inflict Wounds, Blight, Circle of Death, and Finger of Death work great for that. While other spells like Cone of Cold, or Revivify, and Sunburst cover other big damaging spells that you might throw on Joker for coverage. And look, I could be here all day listing off his different personas and their spells. But I'm going to be 100% honest with you like usual. I did not care about the spell list when it came to creating Joker's sheet, because that's the entire point of his powers as a trickster, not to be restricted to a single persona, one build path. Take whatever spells you want. Joker's story goes far beyond just beating up a washed-up athlete turned gym teacher. He frees artists from abusive teachers, takes down mob bosses, helps nerdy girls out of deep depressions, and even topples the political juggernaut that put him in this situation to begin with. But one thing I don't think Joker expected was, despite all the work that the Phantom Thieves put into reforming criminals, that they would get beaten by a cup. A big, shiny cup. But not just any cup. The Holy Grail. One made by the collective will of humans to have someone or something to rule over them. To decide for them. And when the Phantom Thieves lost, that same subconscious, the same people they saved, simply forgot them. And when the metaverse is reality, being forgotten isn't just death. It's never being born, never existing to begin with. But even this, even literally being erased from the world by the collective willpower of the entire human race forgetting you, and no longer existing, Joker, and by extension the rest of the Phantom Thieves, refused to stay down. Joker out-willpowered the entirety of humanity to come back from non-existence. And what do they do after coming back from this? they go for round 2. And this time, with a little bit more strategy from Joker, they manage to pull through, forcing Yaldabaoth, I think I said that right, the god of control, to come and face them himself. You see, I told you this was a JRPG, there he is, there's God, go steal his lunch money. And Joker does that in the best way possible. For the last fight of the base game, he summons his ultimate persona, who still hits really hard with curse, and in this case, gun damage. But we've already covered that, so instead, I want to make sure that you can in fact shoot God in the face and tell him to mind his own goddamn business with Sinful Shell. Which, by the way, in-game has 0 cost and does 0 damage. It just kills God. And you know what? I have the perfect thing for this. A very well-known 9th level spell called Power Word Kill. If the target is under 100 hit points, they just die. No save, no attack roll, nothing. Just death. And this spell is actually stronger than it used to be. In old 5e, if you cast this spell and the target had over 100 hit points, nothing. You fired a blank. But with the new rules, you do the same thing. They take 12d12 psychic damage, which sure, isn't instant death, but it's still at least something for blowing your 9th level spell slot. So it's the perfect thing to finish off a cocky god who thinks they've won. And yeah, there is technically more after this, with Maruki puppeting God's corpse and controlling reality to make everyone happy. He even brings people back to life. Which is where most of the Samaria stuff happens, but I've given way too many spoilers in this video already. And it's not like you don't know this song and dance already. Second verse, same as the first, Joker shoots God in the face for the second time, and then they hash out the differences like gentlemen, with their fists. Which just goes to show that you do not mess with the Phantom Thieves. Whether it's assaulting students or merging reality with the metaverse, the Phantom Thieves will not sit back and let it happen.
Checkmate.
Okay, so this is officially now the longest video. I didn't expect it to break that record so quickly. Yeah. So, I did take a short break while working on this one for the holidays. Well, it was meant to be a holiday thing, but then I got sick, and you probably heard that in my voice a little bit. My throat is still very scratchy and sore. This video took me like 3 days to record. You also may have noticed I streamed a bunch of me playing this game, so that was fun. I got the game for like 20 bucks during the Christmas sale on Steam, which is great since I already paid full price for it once before, and put like 180 hours into it. Also, I want to remind you that if you want the other members of the Phantom Thieves, you can get them on my Patreon. I made all of them, every single one of them. But there is no way I'm editing together like a 2-hour-long video for that, so you can find them there. And while you're on my Patreon, you can also vote on the polls to decide what team I make next. At the moment, Section 6 from ZZZ is winning, and since I only have so much time, I'm probably going to get working on that pretty soon. Because, you know, I kind of have to play a lot of ZZZ now. Anyways, as always, I want to thank my testers and my patrons. You guys have helped me so much with the channel this year. The growth compared to the first channel is amazing, so let's keep it up and get even bigger. Let's see if we can get past the 30,000 subs from before. But that's going to do it for today. I will see you all next time, and as always, have a wonderful day.